Hold on. It's not a prop. It's really dry and thirsty today. And where my boy Christian at? He went in the back. Look, there is no way I can do that energy, right? Like, look, I'm staring down 40. And then all y'all like, oh, you're still a baby. I got it. But like, there's a reason I'm wearing this. This weekend was VBS. And when you're 38 and you're over like games, that's what we were doing. And I was like, making a fool of myself because I want people to see that the pastor's fun. And the next day you're like, oh man, the pastor's broken. So today I'm doubling up on the Ghost. I got a Holy Ghost and Ghost Energy. So, hey, Ghost, if you want to sponsor our church, I don't know what we're going to do, and I don't know what sponsorship looks like, and like, is that biblical? I don't know, but I wouldn't say no to a free pallet of Ghost. So, no, that was just because I'm a little thirsty today, so if I get dry, I'll just sip on that. Speaking of our kids, so last Saturday, not yesterday, but last Saturday I had to come to the church. I don't remember what it was, but I came here to get something or print something or do something. And I see a mower mowing, and we have volunteers who do some mowing. Well, we had a new volunteer to cover for our normal crew. Their second service, typically. So if you happen to bump into the Moretzes, ask for their second son, Samuel, and give him a fist bump because, Tasha, how old is Samuel? 9. Okay, we had a 9-year-old come to us about a month ago and said, if you need help mowing, can I please help? I love to mow. And his dad said he's actually pretty good at it. And so, y'all, we had a 9-year-old volunteer his time last Saturday to spend the day mowing the property for us. So I want to thank Samuel for stepping up. I love seeing our young ones putting us not so. I want to thank Samuel for stepping up. Our young shame when they're out volunteering us, so it gives us an incentive to keep going. So thank you, Samuel, for that. And then, like I said, this why I'm wearing this, because I know you're probably like, oh my goodness, the pastor has a color on. If you've noticed, hold on, let's see if you've noticed. Typically, what's my t-shirt color? Black. Okay, yeah, y'all know I love black t-shirts, because if I had a donut yesterday, black helps me hide that fact, right? So, but I'm wearing my bright orange because that's what our crew leaders wore. This was our VBS weekend, and y'all, we had a blast. In fact, I was putting together a slideshow. It's not finished yet, and I didn't want to throw out a half-finished product for you because we went late last night having a ball. So you're not going to want to miss it. Come back next week because it was a lot of fun, and we have some first-person GoPro-style camera of a slip and slide with the kids going crazy. Y'all, it was a blast. They had a good time. So thank you to all who supported VBS. Most of you grabbed some kind of flyer that said, all right, I'm going to bring this, I want to bring that. I think my family had beach balls, and there was s'more stuff and all these great things. So without your help, we wouldn't have had the supplies to pull it off. And then I want to thank my crew leaders. We had almost as many adult helpers as we had kids because we have that many people who are invested in the next generation, and that is really cool to see. I don't know if y'all see how hype that is, but to see a church pour out into their kids, the next generation, tells me we're going to be good for a while because we're going to be raising a whole new crew of believers, and that is exciting. So thank you guys for helping make VBS a success. Now, let's go ahead. That's all I got today. Let's dive into what we're studying. We're continuing our journey through Hebrews chapter 11. Thank you for paying attention. So we were working our way through at a pretty good pace through the book of Hebrews into what we're studying. We're continuing our journey through Hebrews chapter 11. Ice. Let me tell you about how it was about 2001, somewhere around 2001. Ice. Let me tell you about how it was about 2001, somewhere around 2001, 2002. And so growing up, my family lived in a more rural subdivision. It was still a subdivision, but it was not on the main, what you're used to, if you went to Winston or something, which meant there's a lot of trees, a lot of woods. We played in the woods, we played in the creek. It was a subdivision, but there was at least every lot had about an acre, and most of it was wooded. And we lived in the back section of this remote subdivision near the cul-de-sac. So, we're not a lot of in and out traffic. It's just whoever's back there is back there. And especially not so for this snow day. Because it was one of those snows where the snow and ice pack on the asphalt itself, so you get that sheen of white. You know what I'm talking about? I'm not talking about like, oh, it's a little icy or it's a little powdery. It's like it comes together, and it's like somebody took a Zamboni and drove over it, got it ready for the ice rink. If you don't know what that is, Zambonis are cool. It's a really fun word, and go look it up. Hockey is a blast. But back to my story. So it's this awesome, iced over roads are the best sledding. It's not so much fun if you're an adult having to go to work. But if you're a 14-year-old kid, you're already out of school, it is a blast because you get to sled. And y'all, old school sleds in our snows that we typically get here in North Carolina, they're kind of the worst. You know what I'm talking about? The wooden ones with the metal runners. We get that powdery snow, and it doesn't. You can get a little bit, but except for when you have an iced over road. And then the old school metal runner sleds are the best sleds you can ever have because, y'all, you can get in there, you can get some speed, and you can carve and cut through the ice. It was a blast. So I'm having a good time. My dad comes home after work. The sun's getting ready to set. You know, it's in the winter, so it's about 5, 6 o'clock. It's getting dark, kind of dim outside. And Dad comes in, and he's like, hey, come on, boy. I need you to get in the truck. I was like, all right, come on. So I got outside, and Dad threw me the keys. He says, you're driving. I was like, oh, what? 14, remember, haven't had driver's ed yet. And Dad's like, no, you're driving. Y'all, I'm like, all right, I've driven before. My dad was the old school kind of dad who would rural subdivision, not a lot of traffic. So when we'd be on the way home at night, he'd stop at the start of our subdivision, have me switch with him around 13, 14 to help me learn how to drive, to practice. A lot of people don't like to do that these days, but Dad was kind of old school that way, and I'm glad he was. So I already knew the basics of driving. But y'all, this is in the snow, in the ice. And Dad's like, hey, sit in my new truck and let's go. He had a little Toyota Tacoma, like an early 2000s model, and it was only 2-wheel drive, had the 4-wheel drive suspension, but it was only 2-wheel drive. And I'm like, you sure? And he's like, yeah, no. I'm like, okay. Y'all, 14-year-old me had a little bit of an existential crisis on the inside. I didn't want to show it, but I'm thinking, this is Dad's truck. And if I wreck it, even though it was his idea, I know somehow, some way, it's going to be my fault, right? You know how kids are. Like, you do something, you just assume you're going to get in trouble. And so I'm like, you want me to do what? You want me to drive your truck in the snow? Come on, man. He's like, no, we got to do it. He says, because I need you to learn how to handle tough situations. I need you to learn how to drive in poor weather conditions. Like, okay, let's do it. So we start driving. I'm like, okay, I kind of got the feel. It feels a little slippery. We're driving around. He's like, all right, now, this is how you fishtail. What? No, this is how you fishtail. Do it. You sure? Do it. Okay. Ooh, fishtail. No. I need you to fishtail. So we start. He's like, great. Now put it in a slide. What? Put it in a slide. Oh, no. We go sideways. He goes, now, counter steer. And he starts teaching me how to counter steer out of a fishtail, out of a slide, correct it, so you stay safe. And that was a blast. Yo, I found out real early, when it snows, everything in me now wants to get in my car and go sliding around. Okay, hold on. Let's be honest. The camera's on you, me, not you, so you don't have to worry about the police finding out. Who likes to go spinning in the snow? That's what I thought. All right, hold on. As a disclaimer, Lexington Community Church, its leadership, employees, volunteers, and elders do not advise being reckless while operating a motor vehicle. It is important to obey traffic laws, to not drive outside one's ability beyond the situation. Now that that's out there, so the lawyers can't come at us, no one can add us at the comments and hate on us. All right, y'all, it was fun. It was fun. All right, so now fast forward, I'm in my 20s. It's not snow, it's in the summertime. And y'all know a good old North Carolina summer where we haven't had a lot of rain. The ground, that good old North Carolina clay, gets a real hard packed and a little dusty on top, right? All right, keep that in mind. Same subdivision in my 20s with my own car. And I'm leaving my subdivision and I come around a blind curve. A lot of trees, wooded lots, remember? So you can't see driveways. And I'm just coming around a corner. But it just happened at the same time I come around the blind corner, a truck is backing out of their driveway. Well, you know, if it's a wooded lot where the trees come up to the road line and you're backing out, you got like a million feet of tailgate and bed, so you're not going to see a car coming, and he pulls out right in front of me. I have an option. I don't have enough time to stop. Like I can slam on brakes, but I'm going to T-bone directly into the side of this truck. So my only option is either just take it head on, which don't do. That's not a good idea. Or try to steer around. So I'm hitting the brakes to go ahead and slow down my speed, and I swerve around him. Well, I have to go a little far because he's already backing out like he's going to swing it wide. My left tires hit the median, the grass on the side of the road. Well, remember, North Carolina summer, hard-packed clay, a little dusty on top. That means it's slick for a car. And so when I, get over and I've made it past the truck, all of a sudden, we're tail spinning again. It reminds me of when I was in my truck, except for this time, I'm not thinking about what I know how to do. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I just about died. So I've locked down the brake. Worst thing you can do, but I did it. Now, if we were just on pavement and I locked down the brake because I'm trying to come to a stop so I don't hit something, that's where ABS comes in and helps you pump the brake. ABS is only but so good when you already are in the spin. And so I just made it worse by holding the brake, and I lose control. Panic made me forget what I had been taught. Now, I did a full 180-degree spin, landed back on the road. Thankfully, thank God, nobody got hurt, nothing got hit. I don't know how. Y'all, I think I have gone through about a legion and a half of guardian angels, and they're all retired or medically retired, just getting me to 37. So I probably had like 15 of them that day, just throwing the hands, stopping cars, picking up. I don't know what happened, but the dust settled, and we're all looking around like, okay. So I drive on off. But you see, I barely made it out of that without getting seriously injured. If I had not succumbed to the panic of the moment, I would have remembered what I had been taught, and I could have regained control of the vehicle, but I didn't. It's kind of that way with our own lives. When we face hard times, when we face desperate times, potential even life-ending times, it becomes easy for us to give into fear. Now, as we said before, our emotions are not a bad thing. God gave us emotions like fear for a reason, and fear is a good thing. Fear is what tells us, hey, no matter how fluffy the grizzly bear looks, don't go pet it. It doesn't want scritches, it wants to eat you. So fear says, hold on, I know he's cute, he will kill you. Fear is what helps us do that. But it's when it's given control over our lives. And that's with any emotion, not just fear. When it gets control over our lives, that's when things start to spiral. That's why even trained swimmers drown. Because if panic sets in, it prevents the mind from working properly, and all your techniques, all the instructions you've ever learned seem to just vanish from thought. Today we're going to find our man Moses. We're still looking at Moses in Hebrews 11, and he's leading the people of Israel, and we find them faced in a similar situation. So let's start with our reading from Hebrews 11 today. We're now starting in verse 28. If you're following along, Hebrews 11:28. It will also be on the screen behind me. Let's see what Hebrews has to say before we dive in. Hebrews 11 verse 28 starts like this. It was by faith that Moses commanded the people of Israel to keep the Passover and to sprinkle blood on the doorposts so that the angel of death would not kill their firstborn sons. It was by faith that the people of Israel went right through the Red Sea as though they were on dry ground. But when the Egyptians tried to follow, they were all drowned. Most of us know the story of Moses. We're familiar with crossing the Red Sea. Like if nothing else, it's Charlton Heston's 10 Commandments taught us Moses got the 10 Commandments and he split the Red Sea, right? So we all know that. But I really want us to break it down today because what we see is there's something about faith that the writer of Hebrews, through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, knew was important for us to lock in on. And so let's break down this aspect of this story through the lens of faith. But before we get to the Red Sea, let's pause for a moment because that first verse is still there. It dealt with the Passover. Now the reality is, church, when you look at the Passover, when you study the Passover, we could easily spend an entire day just discussing the Passover. And you can come at it from numerous angles and learn a lot of things about God, his plan, who he is, what he does, all through just this event of the Passover. But I was studying ahead, looking what's coming down the line for Hebrews 11, and in the coming weeks, we have a theme coming up that's very similar to how I would have approached Hebrews 11, talking about the Passover today. So we're going to save that idea until we get there. But I still don't want us to skip over it because there is something to be learned. The Passover event was the precursor to the 10th plague. There were 10 plagues that God put on Egypt until they broke control and let the people go. And so that means, if you do the math, if that's the final, that means leading up to it, there would have been how many? 9. Okay, I got like 2 math people. It's okay. It's early in the morning. 10 minus 1 is 9. There's 9 other plagues. They were this. They turned the Nile to blood. There was a insurgence of frogs. There was a plague of lice. There was flies. There was pestilence, boils. There was hail from heaven. There was locust. And then there was darkness. We've heard about this. But if you read and study this without looking actually into it, especially understanding both the culture and history of the Egyptians, you might miss that each of these plagues was a targeted response by God to Egypt. They weren't just random happenstance. They served a purpose. You see, Egypt was one of the, if not the most wealthy country in that time period. But they also worshipped a pantheon of false gods and goddesses. Ra, Amenhotep, I think was one of them. Horus. You've probably heard some of these names. If you study it, what you find is that each plague either targeted at an important aspect of Egyptian economy, or against their pantheon directly. For instance, the frogs, they had a frog goddess, and God's like, oh, you pray to this frog goddess? Okay, what happens when frogs overwhelm you? And so, ta-da, frogs. In fact, look at that last one before the Passover, darkness. You see, in the Egyptian pantheon, they had a king god, kind of like the Greeks had Zeus. You had a king god, and they called him Ra. And can you guess what he was the god of? The sun. Yeah, so you're following along. You know what spits directly in the face of a sun god? Oh, I don't know. Total darkness when it should be daylight. God was flexing. He was showing out. He said, I am the one and only deity. I am the creator of the universe, and you may worship this being you've created, and you think he holds the power of the sun. Well, let me show you what happens when the sun goes dark. Even your king God has no power here. Each plague was symbolic. Then we get to the 10th plague. And now we see the death of the firstborn son. As we've discussed before, the firstborn son throughout most of human history has held a special place because that was the son that was to inherit the family's legacy. I mean, we even see it today with the British monarchs. It's not Harry who's going to become king when Charles dies. It's who? It's William. Why? Because he's the firstborn son. And so here it is. God says, I am going to finish it by this. I'm going to show you that I'm not only the God of yesterday, I'm not only the God of today, but I'm also the God of tomorrow, your future. And he targets directly the future of the Egyptian lineage. But he didn't want it to be without a way to escape, because this also was going to affect the Israelites who were in slavery. And so he created the Passover, a means to escape. Like I said, we could spend an entire day breaking down the aspects of the Passover, but I need you to understand this. In this moment, the way God designed the Passover, what he was really doing is painting a picture for the world to let them know what his plan of salvation was going to be. Because you see, the Bible tells us the last enemy who's going to be destroyed is death. And that's done through the power of Jesus. And he was the ultimate Passover lamb who died in our place. We're covered by his blood so that we can escape death as well. And I'm not talking about this temporary death. I'm talking about the final death. And so the Hebrew people, in order to be spared or passed over, that's where the name comes from from the death angel, the family had to paint the blood of the Passover lamb over their doorpost and follow a few other specific instructions. And that takes a lot of faith to do, because that's a kind of random instruction. Hey, go kill a lamb, make some bread without yeast in it, because I need you to be able to leave, have your sandals on in the middle of the night, things packed. You got to be ready to get out of there. And these are the events that Passover. And then at that lamb you sacrifice, take his blood and paint it on your door. Like, out of context, if someone told you to do that, you would think they had lost their minds, right? What do you mean, paint blood on my door? But God gave those instructions to Moses, who passed it down to the Israelites, and in faith, they obeyed, and they were spared. But the Egyptians were not, and at this point, Pharaoh is broken. Let's look at what the Old Testament account is of these events, and we're going to find ourselves now in Exodus chapter 12. If you're following along in a paper Bible or on your device, go ahead and turn to Exodus 12, because we're going to be looking mostly now in Exodus 12, 13, and 14 for the rest of today. So we're in Exodus chapter 12, and let's pick up in verse 28. So the people of Israel did just as the Lord had commanded through Moses and Aaron. And that night at midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn sons in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn son of Pharaoh who sat on his throne to the firstborn son of the prisoner in the dungeon. Even the firstborn of their livestock was killed. Pharaoh and all his officials and all the people of Egypt woke up during the night, and loud wailing was heard throughout the land of Egypt. There was not a single house where someone had not died. Pharaoh sent for Moses and Aaron during the night. "Get out," he ordered. "Leave my people and take the rest of the Israelites with you. Go and worship the Lord as you have requested." So finally, what the people of Israel have been crying out for generations, what God has taken Moses out of his exile in the wilderness of Midian and called him back to facilitate. The thing that this book of the Bible is named after, the Exodus, or the exit of the people of Israel from Egypt, it's finally coming to fruition. God is now officially freeing what scholars estimate somewhere between 2 and 4 million people from slavery. And so they leave. We pick up now in Exodus chapter 13, because right off the bat, we see God is up to something. Because he doesn't just say, all right, cool, you're free, get on, let's get home. He does something that goes against the norm, the standard. He does something a little backwards, seemingly. And it makes the people, what's God doing? This doesn't make sense. But we got to remember, when we study the Bible, God doesn't make mistakes. He's much wiser than we can ever be. He has a plan always. So now we pick up in Exodus chapter 13, starting in verse 17. So the people have left, right? When Pharaoh finally let the people go, here it is, God did not lead them along the main road that runs through the Philistine territory, even though it was the shortest route to the promised land. God said, if the people are faced with a battle, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. Hang on to that. That's going to come back for us. So God led them in a roundabout way through the wilderness toward the Red Sea. Thus the Israelites left Egypt like an army ready for battle. So God says, hey, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. We're going to go that way, right? He says, we're going the wrong way, the long, long way, the scenic route. You're like, why? What explains it here? The short way, the main road, was full of warring tribes and nations that had encamped along that route. And so the fastest way back would have put the people right in their path. And God knew, that's why I said hang on to it. God knew that the moment they faced major opposition, they would start being like, you know what? I think Egypt was cool. You know, you just prayed to get out. They're like, yeah, but look, so we're going to go back. He knew that was their tendency. So he took them the long way for their own good. And so they leave. And so now we pick up Exodus 13, starting in verse 20. It says, the Israelites left Succoth and camped at Etham on the edge of the wilderness. The Lord went ahead of them, and this is important because of what we're about to see. He guided them by the day with a pillar of cloud, and he provided light at night with a pillar of fire. This allowed them to travel by day or by night. And the Lord did not remove the pillar of cloud or pillar of fire from its place in front of the people. The reason we're reading those verses is I need you to see this. The pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire. Y'all, let's be real. If I'm in the Israelite camp and there is a literal wall of fire in the sky leading me, how could you not think, well, there's God, we're good? How can you not say, God's with us? Obviously, look. Well, that's easy to say, but it's much easier to forget his presence, even though it's in front of you, as we're about to find out shortly. So the Israelites leave, they take the route God chose, and they're on their way. But then something awesome happens, something that's often missed when you're reading through Exodus, or if you're just hearing the Bible retold to you. You don't usually get this, but it's too important to miss. You see, God pulls the equivalent of a pump fake. He jukes out the Egyptians, literally. Look now at Exodus chapter 14. Then the Lord gave these instructions to Moses. Order the Israelites to turn back and camp at Pi-hahiroth between Migdol and the sea. Camp there along the shore, across from Baal-zephon. Then Pharaoh will think the Israelites are confused. They are trapped in the wilderness. And once again, I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will chase after you. I have planned this in order to display my glory through Pharaoh and his whole army. After this, the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So the Israelites camped there as they were told. So notice what God's telling Moses. Hey, I want to have you turn around like we missed our turn and start wandering back. And I'm doing it on purpose. Remember, church, God does nothing by accident. He's got a plan. And we have to remember that going forward. Keep this in mind. He's setting something up on purpose. And just like he said, Pharaoh takes the bait. So Pharaoh's like, oh man, they are lost. You know what? It was tough going through those plagues. But you know what's going to be tougher? Not having 2 to 4 million people doing our work for us for free. Go back and get them. They're lost. They're not going to get out of here. This is easy pickings. Go get them. And so Pharaoh sends his elite chariot troops to go round them up and bring them back. And this is the point we focus on for the rest of the day. And so if you've gotten nothing else from the earlier parts of the sermon, I ask you this, lock in on what we discuss next, because we're about to see something powerful. Because you see, in the next few moments, God is going to show his glory through the faith of Moses. But it's not an easy demonstration to get through. Now, as is often the case, God gets the most glory in the times in our lives where we are at our lowest. When the odds are stacked against us, when the chips are down, when we feel like we're at rock bottom, when we think, I have no way out of this. In those moments of sheer desperation and often sheer depression, we see this. There is God. That's when he shows up in a big way. So let's continue in the Exodus story. We're now in Exodus 14, starting in verse 10. As Pharaoh approached, the people of Israel looked up and panicked when they saw the Egyptians overtaking them. They cried out to the Lord, and they said to Moses, why did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? Weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt? What have you done to us? Why did you make us leave Egypt? Didn't we tell you this would happen while we were still in Egypt? We said, leave us alone. Let us be slaves to the Egyptians. It's better to be a slave in Egypt than a corpse in the wilderness. But Moses told the people, don't be afraid. Just stand still and watch the Lord rescue you today. The Egyptians you see today will never be seen again. The Lord himself will fight for you. Just stay calm. The people of Israel feel trapped because, for good reason, they have a sea in front of them. Can't cross it. It's 2 to 4 million people. That's a lot of people and livestock and belongings to try to wade through a water. Pharaoh's army's right on their heads, like right behind them, pushing them. And nothing but wilderness on either side. If they try to run to either side, Pharaoh's going to take them. They are stuck. But I would say if you and I were in a similar situation, we would probably react very similar to how they reacted. Except, remember, here's what doesn't make sense to us when we first just look at it from a, I don't see myself in this situation mindset. They just saw God display his power through 10 plagues. They saw him save their firstborn, not the Egyptians, in the moment of the Passover. They've just witnessed God free them from Egypt, something they have been praying and begging God for. And they now have the presence of God literally in front of them as a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Yet, in this moment, they don't see that. All they see is the danger and they panic. You see, fear drives them to desperation. Look again what they said. And it seems crazy what they're saying because they literally were just begging God for help while they were in Egypt. Look again. Starting in verse 10. As Pharaoh approached, the people of Israel looked up and panicked when they saw the Egyptians overtaking them. They cried out to the Lord and they said to Moses, "Why did you bring us here to die in the wilderness? Weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt? What have you done for us? Why did you make us leave Egypt?" Okay, you've seen that stack up. They begged to be freed, and now they're blaming God for being freed. Didn't we tell you this would happen? We said, leave us alone. Let us be slaves in Egypt. Except for they just begged God for release. They said it's better to be a slave in Egypt than a corpse in the wilderness. It seems crazy to us when we read this, but the reality is we do the same thing all the time because the reason they are acting this way is out of fear. But look at what Moses tells them. He says, verse 13, but Moses told the people, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Church, when we become afraid, when we give in to the deep pool of darkness and desperation, we start to panic. And even if it's not a physical panic, it may be a spiritual thing, but we do nonetheless. Let me tell you about a time in my life when I was confronted by something hard. There's been many hardships. I'm not by no means the guy who's dealt with it most. We have all had our share of hard stories. I just want to tell you about a particular time. It's a few years ago, and I was faced with the reality that there was a lack of money in the account, and we didn't have enough to fund the resources we needed. And I'm not talking about, we got to figure out, do we buy toilet paper or paper towels this grocery trip? I'm talking about, is this a bankrupt moment? So in that time when I find the news and I get this news given to us, I cry out to God for help. And I'm like, God, I don't know what to do. And he said, I heard him as if he was audible, prompt my spirit to say, trust me, fast and pray. You've learned about fasting, you've learned about prayer recently, put it in action. All right, God, let's do it. So I did. And I had a lot of people who are very wise in financial methods and resources. And they gave me some recommendations to do some drastic things to turn it around. And I thought about it for a minute, but I was like, you know what? God told me to fast and pray, so I'm going to stay the course. And you know what? God came through. He came through. And when we got through it, I was like, oh, wow. God's awesome. Easy peasy. What would we ever worry about? God is amazing. Now fast forward a few years to this year. I'm again confronted with a similar situation, except for it's not as bad. The last time was like the ship is sinking. This time is, if we're not careful, we might start taking on water. Both are like, hey, pay attention, this is important. But the last time was a lot worse. But guess what? For some reason, this time around, I allowed fear to start creeping in. I started to shoulder the burden that was this desperation. I started internalizing all the different potentials of a life-changing options that may come from it. What if we have to do this? What if we have to do that? Our life's going to change forever. I started thinking to myself, if I don't get this fixed, if this problem is corrected, then this is going to affect more than just me. And y'all, let me be honest, it ate my lunch. In fact, my wife told me that my mood had started to change. The way I interacted with my family had become more frustrated. It had soured. I had almost become obsessive thinking about it. Why? A few years back, when times were worse, I saw God show up in a mighty way. And now I'm thinking, what if he doesn't do it? It's embarrassing to admit it, but it shook me. It shook me. And when I would talk to people about it, I'd be like, we just got to have faith, trying to be spiritual and all that and thinking it's okay. God's going to provide for us. We got this. And though I said that, instead of leaning into that with my own spirit, I kept thinking to myself, but what if he doesn't? But what if he doesn't? You see, church, we all struggle in a similar matter. It may not be in the financial arena, but in some way, shape, or form, we struggle with the same thing in our own lives, because the reality is life is full of dark valleys. The psalmist wrote about it in Psalm 23. He says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. And so the people are just having fear overtake them. But God says, hey, have faith in me. Watch me work. Look at again and what Moses told the people from God, Exodus 14, starting in verse 13. But Moses told the people, don't be afraid. Stand still and watch the Lord rescue you. And he even spells it out. The Egyptians you see today will never be seen again. The Lord himself will fight for you. Just stay calm. The reality is, if we look back at our lives with truth, not bias, then we see time and time and time again where God has been there, where he has showed up, where he has covered us, helped us, lifted us. But for some reason, when we face the dark, when fear creeps in, all that blows away like smoke. C.H. Mackintosh, he's a preacher, Bible commentator, and author from the 1800s. He's quoted saying this: 10,000 mercies are forgotten in one stifling moment. It seems, church, that the human condition is to forget who owns the universe when we face troubled times. If you fast forward through the history of the Hebrew people, you get to the time of the exile when they were conquered by the Babylonians and they were ripped out of their homes. This is around the time of Ezra and Nehemiah. During this time, the great city of Jerusalem was burned, and it was a heartbreaking time for the people of Israel, as you would expect, because most were displaced, most were uprooted, they were carried off to live under the rule of a heathen king in a foreign land. So it's easy to see why we get a book of the Bible called Lamentations. It was written during this time period. And if you study the book of Lamentations, what you see is it's composed of 5 different poems, very similar to how the Psalms are written. And just like in the Psalms, in the book of Lamentations, you see in these 5 poems, man struggling in the darkest moments of his life and trying to understand where God is in all this mess that's around them. So I want us to look in Lamentations chapter 3. Look what the writer of Lamentations has to say here. Starting in verse 16, it says, he has broken my teeth with gravel. He has trampled me in the dust. I have been deprived of peace. I have forgotten what prosperity is. So I say, my splendor is gone and all that I have hoped from the Lord. I remember my affliction and my wandering, the bitterness and the gall. I well remember them, and my soul is downcast within me. That's a broken soul if I've ever heard one. And maybe you've been in a similar situation. But Lamentations chapter 3 does not end in verse 20, because 21 starts with a big conjunction, the conjunction yet. Because the writer says, look at the darkness I'm faced with. Look what I'm surrounded by, the pain, the suffering, the fear. But he says yet, which means even with that, in spite of all this, yet. And what is this yet? Let's pick up in verse 21. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. And what is this he calls to mind? Verse 22. Because of the Lord's great love, we're not consumed. For his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion. Therefore I will wait for him. The Lord is good to those who hope in him, to the one who seeks him. C.H. Mackintosh said 10,000 mercies are forgotten in one stifling moment. And that's what the Hebrews at the Red Sea are faced with. And so they cry out that it would have been better to be a slave than to die here, because they think they're going to die here. But if you can step out of the emotion of the moment and look at it objectively with reality, what you'll see is that God had just gone through some major things, some extraordinary measures to free them from Egypt. So why would he let them down now? Today you may be faced with something similar in your own lives. God told Moses, in the face of such troubled times, he says, and he's literally between, as the phrase would say, a rock and a hard place. He says, yeah, I see your situation. And he gave him instructions. He says, I need you to act in obedience. And that takes real faith, church. When it seems hopeless to stay faithful, notice that word, faithful, to walk in faith. I think of Peter. He tried that. He stepped out of the boat. Y'all, we're getting ready to get to him sinking. But let's just pause for a moment. My man walked on water with Jesus, even for just a moment. He walked on water. He saw Jesus, and he says, if that's really you, Lord, tell me to get out of this boat and walk on the water with you. And Jesus said, come on. And Peter did. He stepped out of the boat in faith, and he walked on water. But then he lost sight of Jesus. Look at Matthew 14, verse 30. But when he being Peter, saw the strong wind in the waves, here it is. He was terrified. Fear sets in, and he began to sink. Save me, Lord, he shouted. In faith, he stepped out and it worked. But when he lost faith, he began to sink. Why? Because fear took over. And so maybe today you're struggling. Maybe you know you should be obedient. You know what God tells you to do, but you're having a hard time. Maybe it's you struggle with showing love and forgiveness because you're afraid to get hurt again. Maybe you battle. You know God wants you to be generous with your resources, to give God your first and your best, to support ministries so that can keep happening. But you think, I got so much bills and things to pay. Maybe you're struggling not to compromise because you want that promotion. Or you don't want to lose your job, and so you're willing to fudge it a little bit. You're willing to do something you're not supposed to. Or maybe you're just desperate. You feel alone. And so instead of waiting on God and learning to let him be your all, your portion forever, and then finding a spouse as a partner, you instead look for a spouse to fill that void in your life, having this savior complex for another person because you have a fear of being alone. Maybe today you're in the depths of depression and despair, and you're starting to hear the siren song. It's luring you to just give in, just give up. It's telling you there's no hope. There's no more light to cling to. Just succumb to the darkness. Whatever it is in your life, remember back to the writer of Lamentations. He said this, yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. And what was it again? Verse 22. Because of the Lord's great love, we're not consumed. For his compassions, what? They never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness, God. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for him. The Lord is good to those who hope is in him, to the one who seeks him. Church, this is why it is so important to truly know God. You see, when you seek him daily through his word, y'all, I don't know if you realize this, he gave us his word. His very words are captured in the Bible and have been preserved for generation after generation. And when you are daily in that word, what he has done time and time again for thousands of years, he is faithful. You see his mercies. And so when you start to look back on your own life objectively, you realize how much you yourself have to be thankful for. Don't do what C.H. Mackintosh warned us. Don't forget the 10,000 mercies just because of one instance. And so I challenge you today to walk in obedience, walk in faith. Psalm 91, verses 1 and 2. Those who live in the shelter of the Most High will find rest in the shadow of the Almighty. This I declare about the Lord. He alone is my refuge, my place of safety. He is my God, and I trust in him. Psalm 139, 5 and 6. You go before me and follow me. You place your hand of blessing on my head. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too great for me to understand. Romans 15:13, Paul prays this. I pray that God, the source of hope, will fill you completely with joy and peace because you trust in him. Then you will overflow with confident hope through the power of the Holy Spirit. Isaiah 41:10, don't be afraid, for I am with you. Don't be discouraged, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will hold you up with my victorious right hand. Church, the reality is we could spend the rest of today poring over the promises of God. The scriptures hold countless promises for us. But at the end of the day, it's up to us to decide. If you remember back a few weeks ago when we studied Joseph, we realized there's a question we have to ask ourselves, and it was this: do we believe God is who he says he is? And do we believe he will do the things he says he will do? That's the real question for us. And if you say, well, yes, faith is the key that will help you step out in darkness, to walk forward in obedience no matter the cost. And so if you're like the Hebrew people today, you're facing an impossible sea of your own with the enemy at your back, what will you do? Will you have faith? You see, Moses did. God told him, hold your rod out. And so Moses said, okay. Moses obeyed, held his rod out over the sea, and God made a path. And it wasn't just, oh, well, they could cross. No, he made a dry path, which is so wild, in the middle of an ocean to get them through. And it wasn't just that he rescued them. He also conquered their enemy as well. Because when they safely crossed with the enemy at their back, God closed the waters back and ended that army permanently. So what will you do? Will you have faith? Let's pray. God, we thank you again for your word, how well we love it, and how good it is to teach us. God, what seems like a simple repeat story that we've heard since Sunday school days, the story of Moses and the Red Sea. What we find, God, is a reality for us as adults who face the reality of the darkness of this world, and yet we know that in those dark moments, if we don't give in to fear, but instead we lean into faith, we get to see you be faithful time and time again. As C.H. Mackintosh says, often 10,000 mercies are forgotten in a single stifling moment because God, fear sets in and we start to panic and we forget. So God, I ask that you would help us today. I know there are some here struggling in a dark time of their own. It takes many forms, but God, we each, at some point in our lives, will face a Red Sea moment. And some are doing that right now. So especially for them, God, but for all of us when it comes in our path, I ask that you would bolster our faith. This thing that we've been studying for weeks and weeks and weeks. The important key to everything we believe. That you would bolster that faith so that we do not forget your mercies. We don't panic and we don't let fear set in, but instead we say, great is your faithfulness. You are my God, and you I will trust. Your mercies are new every morning. So God, we know that you have promised to hold us up with your victorious right hand. The psalmist said you put your hand of blessing on us. Let us not forget it, God. Please. So bolster us, strengthen us. Help us to endure, as we've seen time and again through the book of James, that when we endure through faith, it has a chance to grow until we are perfect and complete, needing nothing. And so, God, we ask you to help us with that because we know Based on the human condition, it's impossible on our own. So through your Spirit, help us. For the times we have doubted and succumbed to fear, God, we ask for forgiveness today. I myself admitted to times of forgiveness that I need because of how I've chosen to give in to fear instead of trusting. I'm sorry for that, God. And for each of us, we ask for forgiveness. And we thank you for being a forgiving, loving God. And we thank you for his Son, your Son, who you sent to die for us. And through him, even the last enemy, death,